for another session. So I'll do the serious stuff now. Like an impaired? I like it. But I'm going to tell you something about geography. So back to the sensible stuff now. Right. Hi, everybody. The point of this session is going to be fairly short. I'm going to be looking at the candidate record form. Very briefly, I want you to go back over your candidate record form. I fed back to most of you 11 out of the 13 of you doing geography. So I fed back to you, I've emailed you some things that I think you need to think about. It's important to get the language tight on your candidate record form so the language is technical, sensible, very specific, using that SMART process as a target, very old target setting idea, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time related. So I'm going to use this session here just to kind of go back over that, and I want you to go over your candidate record form and get it right. Once you've got the candidate record form right, then you need to check your introduction has that information within it, it's specific, and then that then leads on to trickles into your methodology. So you've got time to do this, and I'm going to give this week for you to backtrack and go over it. You do need to have that approach, that attitude where you're going back over things. Just because you've got it done doesn't mean to say it's done permanently. So you need to have this attitude of really sort of knuckling down, going through it with a fine-tooth comb, scrutinize it to make it the best you can. All right, because you don't want to get into your results presentation analysis and realize you've gone down a dead end, or something isn't measurable, or you've got to unstitch everything that you've done. So it's important to get this right. Okay. So I'm going to bring this slide up. It's a very short slide. I don't intend to talk to you for very long, as I said. So let's get the document up. Share that. That's the wrong slide. So a couple of things here to be thinking about. Let's just get this to the beginning. So there's my little section there for future reference if you want to kind of go through this. You have had the document that I'm about to use as the template for you to look at. I will re-email that through Show My Homework for you to look at. It is an important document. There's other bits to it that have to be filled in when we send in your project work. But as an examiner, I will look at that candidate record form. When it goes off to the moderator, importantly, it needs to be filled out correctly. So it's an official document. It needs to be done properly, both by you and me and Sandon School. Okay, so it needs to be done officially. So let's have a look at a few things here. So if I just hover the mouse around here, so at the top of that page where you're filling in, you need that specific title. Okay, it needs to be sensible. It needs to be broad enough without being too ambitious. But you must use technical words in it, and that's why I'm saying this clear component aspect here. You must have a named area in there. I think most of you have done that. One or two of you yet to put that in. And I think the majority of you, that's going to be the location that we went to, and that was Minehead. Okay, now this is where I said clear components, explicitly or heavily implied. So what I mean by explicitly, you might have actually identified specific factors on the coastal landscape that you're looking at, like geology. Or you might be looking at the human impact, or the marine processes, or the subaerial processes. Okay, or you might heavily imply. What I'm really trying to get across with this bit here is that you might be talking about a range of factors, like physical factors, natural factors, which is the same thing, or human factors, or both. And you're not necessarily going to the exact specific components at this point, but I feel you're using a broad category, hence the word heavily implied, but it's technically put down. There's the correct literacy being used. It's important to get that right because you want your project to have a sense of academia, and that impresses me, who marks it, and if it goes off to the moderator. So do take this seriously and spend that time really thinking it through. These things aren't easy, but at the end of the day, you're doing A-levels and you need to raise your game, and don't take the easy option out of this. Okay, all right. Now I've mentioned some of these things in the introduction video that I did before. So this bit here, there's a section for you to fill in. I've recommended between 2 and 4. Must be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time related. Check they don't overlap. And what I mean by that is when you need to read them out, check they don't say the same thing. They don't want to be too similar. So, you know, I'm looking at coastal management, and then the second one looks at coastal management, and there's hardly any difference. That said, they need to contribute to your overall title. And I've said this before, it's a little bit like a jigsaw. So each of the key questions or hypotheses, sub-hypotheses, whatever you call them, each fulfill a certain aspect when put together, answer the overall question. And you want to check that, go back over it a dozen times, 6 times, whatever it takes, do it. I will pick up on it. The specification link, these are the aspects of the course that you're doing. So many of you done this already. It doesn't need to be overly burdened, but you need to fill it in when we see the examples. I've chosen 2 examples from the booklet for you to look at. This bit here, the investigation focus, so kind of getting a bit more into the nitty-gritty while you're choosing your questions and your titles, a bit of rationale behind it. You do much more of that in your introduction, but still I kind of want to see that. And then the methodology, what primary, you have to have at least one. You have done that. Primary data collection, secondary data sources that you might be going to for later on, the techniques you're using, a list of them, maybe linking to some of the questions at this point, certainly talking about the sampling strategies that you're employing. This bit here, the teacher approval, is important because I have to agree it. It might be that I don't agree it, but I have in your instances. It might be I completely agree it, or what it might be is subject to changes being made. This document that you fill in, once you've done it, it doesn't mean to say it's the finished thing. You can adapt it, you can change it as you go along, tweak it, as I like to call it. Okay, so the document that I have sent you before, but I will put on Show My Homework again, has 12 examples. These have been agreed by Ofqual. They're for all the major syllabuses that undertake NEA project work in geography. So this looks far more complicated than the one that you've got. It's slightly different shape, but you can see the information here. That's just the background. That's where your title goes. And this is nothing to do with the one you're doing, but let's have a look here. So factors affecting variation in infiltration rates. That's what I said here about maybe being heavily implied. So you can, that's a good use of wording there, and suggests you might be looking at some very specific things. You can see the location area, and it's an appropriate size. You're linking the factors to infiltration rates, which was in the spec, although we haven't covered water and carbon. Now, around here are notes that explain what maybe needed to be improved, some commentary about the appropriateness of the feedback, what the teachers are giving their students. And you can see here, if we go to the actual hypotheses or sub-questions, you can see, look, it's // so it really doesn't matter, but just try to be consistent in your approach. So if you look at this one here, hypothesis, infiltration rates in the River Tor drainage basin are affected by several interacting factors, and then being specific: soil type, slope angle, and position, and preceding weather or antecedent conditions. Now, that, you might argue, and it says here, is that a little bit ambitious? Possibly, but there is specific that you're looking at various different things. It's not actually saying how they think it's been affected, but that's not necessarily a problem, but there is this very specific use of factors, very clear, there's no wishy-washiness to them, it's not overly burdened. Then we go into that's the overall hypothesis, and then what they've done here is they've broken this down into sub-components, in this instance 3. So this, look, the higher the percentage of clay in the soil, the lower the infiltration rate, and I'm assuming that this student can go off and prove that. It's very specific, isn't it? So it's linked in with clay, saying high percentage, it means that less water will be able to pass through that substrate, okay, through the actual soil itself. If we go on to this one here, steep slopes and upper slopes have a higher infiltration capacity than gentle slopes and lower slopes. Again, I think that's a good solid one to do. And then a change in weather conditions affects the rate of infiltration. Now, all that you need to make sure, not all, but one of the things you need to make sure is that you've hit the different subcomponents. And you can see each of these they're hitting a different area of this overall hypothesis. So there's jigsaw, each of a piece in the picture, which then can be used to answer this. Here's the rationale, it's referring to the area. It's explaining a little bit about the hypothesis they've done. And here you can see a very, without going into each of the techniques, you can see there's some real thought that's gone on here. And you can see it's been approved by the teacher. And if I move on down here, this one is a bit more applicable to you. So it's about coastal management. Many of you have done yours on coastal management. The coastal management strategies at Sheringham, which is in Norfolk, are sufficiently resilient to coastal erosion. So that's a statement. And then in this instance, again, just remind you, it doesn't matter how you do it, just don't try to jump around too much. I would try to take a logical approach to this. They've got 3 subcomponents. How effective are the coastal management strategies in preventing erosion? Okay, so that's a to what extent almost there. So that's always a good question to do. How much coastal erosion has taken place in Sharon over the last 50 years? That is kind of some background work. Obviously you can do some present day stuff, but you would also need some background secondary. And you can see how that would link into the first sub-question and the overall title. How have the coastal management techniques slowed down coastal erosion? I suppose it's that, again, maybe a little bit of overlap with this one here, but it does seem sufficiently different to the question. And again, you can see there's the rationale, there's some very specific techniques, and you can see some commentary, it's been approved and so forth. Again, have a read of these notes here. What I'm trying to get you to do is to navigate around these things and spending a bit of time like we have in this lockdown process here. We don't want to race on. I've set you the introduction methodology to get right. Having viewed your candidate record forms, again, I just feel some of you just need to jazz them up, be a bit more specific, make them a bit more academic on top of the other work that I've got. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'll put some more things on the Show My Homework site of things, other things I've asked you to do, and make sure you've done. Okay, thanks guys. Yeah, I always was going to put some music on. I was going to put use Geography Graham. I was going to do a bit of dancing. I've got a little bit of a quiff going on with my hair for some strange reason. Quite like it, actually. I hope you guys are good. Maybe I'll put a quiz on there. Maybe get a little bit more silly, but staying within the right side of being a teacher. Okay. Adios, amigos. Buenas noches, whatever it is. And I'll see you in the next video clip. Much shorter. I told you it'd be shorter. Anyway, au revoir. He says, not been able to stop the share, end the meeting. Hope you've got a good time like I have. See you later.